True Crime with Jess Rose. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays are my stories that I like to bring to you. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. I'm over on TikTok, which is Jess Rose 5472. If you would like to subscribe or drop a like, I'd really appreciate that. Or you could just watch. I'd appreciate that just as much. So I'm going to start the story now, and it's the brutal stalking of Laurie Show. Okay, so Laurie Michelle Show, she was born the 27th of January 1975 in Pennsylvania, Lancaster. It's a US story. Her mum, Hazel Whitehead, her dad, John Show. Now, Laurie is an only child, so she's the only child of the two of them. Now, they do break up, Hazel and John, but this he's still got a great relationship with Laurie as far as I could see. No, but she does live with her mum, Hazel, okay? Now, I don't know a lot about Laurie's early life. Like I say, she was close to both of her parents. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to fast forward to 1991. Now, unfortunately, as I've said, I don't know a lot about her early life. Just from what I've seen, she was just a lovely, really nice girl, clever, does well at school, very, very close to her mum, Hazel. But that's about all I can really find on her early years. Now, as I said, we come through to 1991, and at this point, Laurie's 16. All right. Now, she went to Conestoga, practice this earlier, Conestoga Valley High School. I butchered that. I'm so sorry if that's your high school or you know the name of it. I'd completely butchered that. But she, like I say, she was a good student. And she also had a part-time job. And I believe she worked in like a clothes shop in the mall. That's what I've heard she's got where she worked. No, she didn't cause Hazel any problems. She was an all-round good girl. That's what I've heard about her. No trouble being brought back to Hazel, no getting in trouble at school. She was just a really, really good girl. Okay. So then we come to the summer of 1991. So of course she's still 16, as I've said. And she begins briefly, and when I say briefly, I mean briefly. It was only for a week. Okay. She dates a lad called Lawrence Youngkin. All right. Now he's got a nickname of Butch. These nicknames, we do this, don't we, on these stories? There's just these nicknames, and you're like, they're just so ridiculous. Because when you see me, I don't know where it would have come from, but anyway, his nickname's Butch, so that's what I'm going to refer to him as. And they only went out a couple of times. They just hung out a couple of times during that week. That was it. That was as far as he went. Okay. Now, Butch himself, he dropped out of high school. He had, and at this point, he's working at a lumberyard. Now, he's 20. He was born in 1971. Now, remember, Laurie's only 16. So, not great. Not great. Okay. But, however, Butch had an on-off girlfriend. Okay. Now, her name is Lisa Michelle Lambert, but she went by the name of Michelle. So that's what I'm going to call her. So from now on, we'll have Butch and Michelle. Okay. Now, Michelle and Butch, they, as I've said, it was like an on-off relationship. It was, from all I've heard of it, it was quite a volatile relationship, quite intense. And they would have these massive rows and break up, but like I say, the breakup would never last long. Now, Michelle, who was born in 1972, she's 19, okay? And she actually lives with Butch in like a caravan trailer in the woods. Yeah. And she'd actually been kicked out of her family home when she was 15. I think Michelle was a little bit of a handful, okay? But she was very, very possessive over Butch. Very possessive over this guy. And he used to play into it and play up to it, okay? So just a really toxic relationship for all intents and purposes. Okay. But Michelle, she finds out about Laurie. Now, from what I'm gathering about Butch, I don't think him seeing a girl was all in, it was unusual. I don't know if it's because she was young. She was 16. I mean, Michelle's only 19. So I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it's the fact that he went on a few dates with her rather than just like a one night stand or one date. I don't know what it was, but Michelle lost her mind. She lost her mind over Laurie. And even though they weren't together, they were in their off period, she was fuming. Okay. And basically, she starts to become obsessed. And when I say obsessed, I mean obsessed with making Laurie pay, okay, for a so-called affair with Butch. There was no affair. They weren't together. It was a week long. It's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it sounds like the kind of thing that, I don't know, a 12-year-old would get annoyed over. Not to the point of obsession, obviously, but just that sort of very immature mindset. Now, her anger wasn't at Butch. I'll point that out. It was all at Laurie. Okay. Now, the obsession with Laurie, it ramped up very quickly, really quickly. Okay. And she started calling her at home, Michelle would. And she'd call Laurie over and over and over again. Just whenever Laurie would pick up, she'd just annihilate her down the phone, calling her for every name under the sun. You're damaging my relationship. She then claims to be pregnant and that you're messing around with a man who's going to be a dad. So all of this kind of stuff. And then Hazel would answer. Obviously, it's Laurie's mum. She lives there too. So when she would answer, Michelle didn't put the phone down. This wasn't I'm going to wait and only speak to Laurie. Oh, no. When Hazel would pick up, do you know what your daughter was doing? And she was with my man and, pregnant and all of this kind of stuff. And it was just basically saying, do you know what she did to me? It was completely unhinged, completely. So after, trying to ignore it and trying to, pull the phone out the wall and everything else, they just decided we're going to change our number. So they do. They change their phone number, which of course Michelle's not happy about this. Really, really not happy about this, because why can't she harass and abuse this girl down the phone? How dare they change their number? So unable to get hold of Laurie, like I say, Butch ended up telling Michelle where Laurie worked. Now, remember, I said she had a part-time job in the mall. It was some sort of clothes shop. Well, one afternoon during that summer, okay, when I say all this happened very quickly, it all happened. This is all over a couple of months. Everything I'm going to tell you, okay? Now, Butch and Michelle turn up to the mall and they wait in the car park. And they're waiting for Laurie to finish work. And she does, and she comes down to the car park with a friend of hers, and they're just talking. And I'm presuming the friend left because I don't hear any more about this friend. But Michelle jumps out of the car, okay? Obviously, or the van or the truck or whatever it is Butcher's got. And she jumps out and she runs at Laurie. And Laurie's terrified of this girl. This woman, I mean, 16 and 19, they're big age gaps in maturity. Well, say maturity, not so much with Michelle, but just in life in general. That's quite a big age gap. And she's terrified of Michelle, and Michelle comes running over, slaps Laurie, begins slamming her head off a nearby truck that was in the car park, just gives her such a hiding in that car park, just screaming at her, if my baby dies, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. If anything happens to my baby, I'm going to kill you. So now, as it turns out, Michelle is actually pregnant. And I've heard some people not excuse her behaviour as such, but kind of say, you know, maybe that could have been why her emotions were all over the place. Well, I've been pregnant twice and don't think I've ever in that time or in life in general been tempted to just run up and slam somebody's head into a truck. It's to kind of excuse it in that way that, you know, if anything, you would avoid confrontation because you would be protecting yourself, so you wouldn't go flying into a fight with somebody. So, but like I say, she is pregnant, and Laurie, oh, she was just terrified. And when she got home, Hazel saw her. I mean, she was a mess. And Hazel was like, you know, we've got to press charges. We have to. Okay. And it was at this time that Laurie confided in her mum. You see, Hazel didn't understand why the relationship with Butch, relationship, I don't know what you would call it after a week. A fling, maybe? I don't know. But she was confused as to why it had finished as abruptly as it did. You know, why it only lasted a week. Laurie wasn't like that. She wasn't that sort of girl. And Laurie confided in her that Butch had actually date raped her during this week. Okay, now remember I said, might say a week, 7 days is nothing, but it wasn't even every day. I think they had 2 or 3 dates, and it was on the last one. It was said that he raped Laurie. Okay, so she confides this in Hazel. So Hazel's just, I can't even imagine as a mum what your emotions would be. You know, you see your 16-year-old daughter who's doing really, really well at school, and she's got this job and she's got a nice little group of friends, and you're very close to her and you talk about everything. And 1 week of seeing this lad, and all of a sudden both of their lives are just in utter turmoil. It's just so sad. Now Michelle herself would tell anybody who would listen, this was the girl who tried to break up her family. Laurie was the, you know, she was kind of like the Scarlet Woman who'd come along and tried to break up their happy home. And she's pregnant, and how can she do this to her? And it just ridiculous, okay? But enter Tabitha Book, okay? Now Tabitha, who's 17 at this point, at this moment in time, she was one of these friends who I've just mentioned that was manipulated by Michelle. Now, I wouldn't say that all the friends were, okay? I wouldn't say all the friends were manipulated or believed what Michelle said, but Tabitha did. And I think maybe because Michelle was older and Butch was older, She maybe looked up to them. She didn't particularly like Laurie. Tabitha didn't. Don't forget, she's only 17. She goes to that high school too. I don't think she had any, there was no love lost between her and Laurie, from what I've heard. Don't know if this was one-sided. But the fact that she had somebody saying, oh, and you know, and she tried to break up my family. I suppose if she's got a dislike for this girl anyway, she's going to be more inclined to believe what Michelle said, and she does. Okay. So Michelle, like I say, she's becoming, I think I've said it, but beyond unhinged now. And she would talk about kidnapping Laurie and slitting her throat to all the friends that would listen, you know, to Butch, to everybody. I mean, obsessed just doesn't seem like the right word to use. Maybe because obsessed we use over anything now, don't we? Oh, I'm obsessed over my dog. But so I don't feel that obsession quite cuts it in this case, because she'd lost her mind. Michelle, she completely lost her mind. Okay. Now we come to the 20th of December, 1991. Okay. Very early morning, about 7-ish. Okay. And Hazel had received a call the day before, which would have been the 19th of December, asking her to come into Laurie's school and to speak to a guidance counsellor there. Now, apparently it was over some lad or something, and she wanted to have this conversation with Hazel about Laurie. Hazel run this by Laurie, like, why am I being called in? What's going on? Laurie's very confused. There's no lad. She's very much learned her lesson. There's no lads in that period of time whatsoever. A complete brain block. So she doesn't know what it's for, but Hazel, she's like, right, well, I've got to go in. I've been called in. I'm going to go in. So, again, 7 o'clock in the morning, they're both up. Laurie's starting to get washed up for school. Hazel leaves before her. Okay. However, when she gets to the school, Hazel, the counsellor wasn't there. And when she checks, because she thinks, oh, maybe they're running late, I'll just hang on. But when no one turns up and she goes and asks at reception, like, I've got a meeting with this guidance counsellor. They're like, we've got nothing down. We've got nothing in the book for any meeting. And she's very confused. She doesn't know what's going on. But she decides to return home, okay? Now, she hasn't been gone long, all right? But when she gets back, one of her neighbours comes out, okay? And just basically says to Hazel, listen, I don't know what's going on in there, but there's a lot of banging in there. I don't know what it is. And I've heard quite a few people basically saying that Hazel she kind of dismissed it a little bit, like, I've got a teenage daughter, it's probably just loud music, it's fine. So she goes into the apartment, Hazel does, and she goes to the bathroom, which is where she left Laurie, because obviously she wants to tell her, look, I've gone to the counsellor, but he wasn't there. You're just gonna have to, if you see him later, tell him I did turn up, he wasn't there. So when she goes into the bathroom, Laurie's not in there, so she thinks, right, okay, and she goes to Laurie's bedroom. And when she walks in, Laurie's on her back, all right? She's on her back, on the floor, covered in blood. I mean, there is blood everywhere. I have seen the crime scene photos. It's horrific. It genuinely is. In this very cute, girly bedroom, there's just blood everywhere. Okay? And Hazel, of course, panics, and as she bends down to see what's going on, she can see there's a rope around Laurie's neck. So she runs to the kitchen, gets a knife, comes back, and as she puts her fingers between Laurie's neck and the rope in order to cut the rope, she sees that her throat slit. Okay. Now I've read that this slit was basically ear to ear. It was about an inch deep. Oh, now Laurie herself, she was still holding on by a thread, and moaning. Okay, and then she was able to say a few things at that moment, and she says it was Michelle did it. Then she just says Michelle a couple of times, and then she says I love you very lightly then, and then she can't talk anymore, and said, obviously she's struggling to take a breath at this point. Hazel's called 911. All right. When the paramedics arrive, obviously Hazel's there holding Laurie, and she says what she was trying to do was she was trying to hold her together. Oh, because of the slit in her throat was so bad. She was literally trying to hold her daughter, keep her in one piece. Oh, just such a shame. So the paramedics come in. Obviously, they try to help Laurie, but they can't. There's just too much damage. And Laurie, Michelle, Shaw died there and then on the 20th of December 1991, age 16, in her bedroom. Oh, now you might be like, well, hang on a minute. When Hazel left, she was fine. She was getting ready for school. Well, what had actually happened was after Hazel had left, Laurie, as I said, was getting ready for school. She was in the bathroom. There was a knock at the door. She thought nothing of it. Part of me was thinking because her mum hadn't long left, maybe she thought her mum had come back, maybe forgot her keys. Because I think after everything she'd been through and the phone calls and then getting there hiding in the car park and everything else, it would have, I would say, make her very nervous to answer the door. So all I can think of was she must have just presumed it was her mum, because she opens the door. And when she opens it, there's Michelle and Tabitha. Okay, remember Tabitha, the 17-year-old, who really didn't need an excuse not to like Laurie. Okay, and Michelle, of course, this is what she's been waiting for. She wants to get this girl on her own. And she tries to slam the door closed, Laurie does. And they just basically force their way in. All right. Now she runs up to her bedroom, Laurie does. But they force their way in. There's two of them. Michelle's a lot older than her. Laurie's not, she was only a quite petite little girl. She didn't stand a chance. She didn't stand a chance against these pair. And what happened then, or which one did what, is still debated all these years later. Okay. Now there is a film. All right. There is a film out there, as I've said, where I will tell you what the film says happened, but correctly, but for a fact, we don't actually know. We don't know for a fact what happened in that moment. And what I mean by that is who did that final damage to Laurie. Because they both starting, it wasn't just, she hadn't just had her threats. They beat this girl in her own bed. They beat her to the floor. You know, she was in a bad way anyway. But who actually cut her throat, we don't know. Okay? Because Michelle says it's Tabitha. Tabitha says it's Michelle. You know, so we don't know. But there is one person that we should believe, and that's Laurie herself. Because she said it was Michelle. Why would you waste the last few breaths you had to, I don't know, frame somebody else? So that to me should be it. Should be open, you know, a closed case. So because she said Michelle's name, the police go to find Michelle, and they actually find Michelle, Butch, and Tabitha at a bowling alley, having a great old time later on that evening. Oh, yes, same day. Same day. We haven't gone through a few days here where they've thought, oh, might be okay. No, same day. They go out and have a great old time, go bowling. So all three, as I've said a minute ago, they all have different stories, okay? And what we do, we come up to the first trial for them in 1992, okay? Now, as I've said, Michelle blames Tabitha, and what Michelle says is, I only wanted to scare her and maybe cut her hair. Well, that doesn't sound like a normal person anyway, but I suppose that's not murder. So I reckon that's what she was going for. You know, I suppose she couldn't say she wasn't there at all. So she could be like, well, I didn't know that was going to happen. And she basically says, Tabitha just went too far. Now, what everyone who was around Michelle at that time said was there was no emotion, no remorse, nothing. It was like a blank stare. It was very cold is what's said about this girl. Okay. Now, Butch, when he was questioned, he said he didn't know either that they were going to go and kill Laurie. He thought as well they were just going to scare her. Well, he dropped them off that morning. So when they knocked on the door, they just got out of Butch's truck. Okay. He dropped them off. He drove around for about 10-15 minutes, and then he came back to collect them. Okay. Now, he was supposed to be their alibi. Why would you need an alibi if you're just scaring somebody? Pranking somebody? But the day before this, do you remember when the phone call had come through for Hazel to go to the school to get her out of the house? Now, I've searched everywhere, and although the film insinuates it, I haven't heard like proof that it was one of them that phoned Hazel and arranged her to be out of the house to see that counsellor. But it all kind of ties in with me. So again, I'm just going to say that's my opinion, but it just makes sense. Who else has done that? So that was the day before. And also, Butch and Michelle went out and they bought, well, Michelle did. He took her and she bought rope, scissors, duct tape, a whole kidnapping kit. Okay. Her and Tabitha were dressed in black. there's all this. She told Tabitha, don't wear any nail varnish or makeup because, it will leave evidence. So this was very well thought out. In my mind, definitely premeditated. That's how I've seen this crime. But when he collected Tabitha and Michelle, he does say that Michelle had blood on her bottoms. He helps them get rid of the knife. He then washes, I believe, Tabitha's clothes as well. Blood doesn't just come out. Blood doesn't just come out in a wash. Okay. Now, Tabitha herself has blamed Michelle. And although she does admit she held Laurie down, so she holds her hands up to holding her down, she says that Laurie was badly beaten. Then she thought that'd be it. She goes, and then Michelle, this was what Tabitha said, she sawed her neck like she was cutting a loaf of bread. I mean, what a description. What a description. This girl's 16 years old. She's done nothing. She went out with the wrong... She got attacked by himself. So she's already gone through all that. And then all of this. For what? Because of your jealousy. Now, Michelle, then she goes even further and says that Butch was in the apartment. But Tabitha refuted this because obviously Butcher said he was in the truck. He drove them, but he was never in the apartment. And Tabitha agrees with that. She says, no, he wasn't there. But Michelle, the love of his life, mother to his child, yeah, she throws it all in his direction, his and Tabitha's. She actually had no part of it, really. It was all them. She had to do it. So then it becomes from being the love of her life to all of a sudden she was in a controlling relationship and he was violent and he made her do it. He made her go. But when Laurie was on the floor, I left, I ran out. I didn't see who did it. I didn't see if it was Butch or Tabitha that did it, but it wasn't me. It's the kind of stuff that's going on. Okay, now they brought also while this is going on in the trial, they brought the joggers. Do you remember the bottoms that I'd said that Michelle had been wearing that had blood on them that had been washed? She tried to say they were Butch's, but at the trial he held them up and they were obviously far too short, far too tiny for him. So that just blew a hole in a story anyway. Okay, so we get to the sentences. Michelle, life no parole. Tabitha, life no parole. And Butch got 10 to 20 years. Now, Butch was actually released in 2004. Okay. Now, normally I'd end a story there. Normally that'd be it. Okay. You might have seen like I'm kind of moving through this quite quick. Well, it's not that I'm moving it through quite quick. It's just that this isn't done. This isn't over. Because in 1997, okay, on appeal, Michelle claimed that she'd been framed by the Lancaster Police Department, okay, in Pennsylvania. And the reason she says they framed her with Laurie's murder is because she was going to come forward with an accusation that she'd been gang raped by several officers in this police department. What? Right. Okay. So that comes forward. But also there's a letter that Michelle had sent to Butch. Okay. And it had like 26 questions on there. All right. Now, this letter had been sent previous to the first trial. And in it, Michelle had said, you know, if I take the blame for this, are you sure I won't get as much time as you would? You know, if I'm going to take the blame for it for you. Basically, I love you. And, you know, all these questions to him. It looked like someone trying to frame somebody. That's exactly what this letter looked like. But this letter was held back from her defense lawyers. Doesn't look good, does it? It doesn't look good. I mean, I don't think it'd have done anything for her, but the fact that they didn't come forward with this letter, basically, which was her, Michelle, to Butch, saying, you know, you know, I'm going to take the blame, but I still love you, and hopefully I won't get as much time, and all of this sort of stuff. It didn't really look good that it was hidden. So on the 16th of April 1997, are you ready? Michelle was released from prison while the judge looked into everything, okay, including that letter from her to Butch, okay. Then we come to the 21st of April 1997, okay. And Michelle's conviction is overturned, with the judge citing prosecutorial misconduct. I know I didn't pronounce that right. Misconduct. And he passed a law, basically, with relation to Michelle, basically saying she can't be retried again either. That's what he did, this judge. I mean, but hang on. We then get to January of 98. Now, she's been free for like 9 months. She must have been like, she'd only done 5 years. She must have thought, this is fabulous. She's out before the other two. Well, January 98, as I've said, the federal appeal was overturned. Okay, now that judge who released Michelle, that judge, turns out, had been impeached. Okay. It wasn't agreed with what he'd said, that she couldn't be charged again. She couldn't stand trial again. It was overturned, and basically had said that she'd not yet exhausted her appeals in state court. Now, you know, if you get life without parole, you get a certain number of appeals to try and get a retrial, or, you know, new evidence brought forward, etc., etc. Well, apparently she hadn't exhausted hers. So they returned her to prison. She was returned back. Oh, tickled me. So in May of 1998, there's a third hearing for Michelle. All right. Now, Michelle now said not only was Butch there, but it was definitely him that slit Laurie's throat. So it's not just that he was there and she didn't know which one it was. No, it's 100% Butch who did it. So she completely turned on him now. She had no part of it. She didn't want any part of it. But yeah, basically it's all him now. Now, again, they brought the joggers. They were too small. Tabitha got in the stand and says he was never there. She admits to her part that she did hold Laurie down. So, sort of, you know, she knew she was guilty and she openly said what she did, but she wasn't going to let Michelle get away with this either, okay? And, yeah, in August of 98, she's found guilty again, okay? Life, no parole, and thank goodness all her appeals now were exhausted in 2005. So that's it. We should not hear any more from Michelle. We can only hope, okay? Now, Hazel, obviously Laurie's mom, I can't imagine that. So she's, as I've said, she had to hold her daughter together when she'd only nipped out to go and see a school counsellor that actually wasn't an appointment. She goes through that. Her daughter dies. They get the people who did it the same day. And then the main culprit ends up getting out after 5 years for 9 months. Imagine what those 9 months would have been like for Hazel. I just can't imagine it. Now, she campaigned for stronger anti-stalking laws in Pennsylvania, and a new law was actually signed in June of 93. Okay, so that's what she'd been doing during the time when she thought they're all locked up, and then she had to go through that. But like I say, I don't believe Michelle will see light of day again. Now, on the 22nd of November 2017, Tabitha, she actually gets resentenced to 28 years to life. Now, don't forget, she had life, no parole. And the reason the Supreme Court did this, they'd banned mandatory life sentences for minors or juveniles. So don't forget, she was 17 at the time. So she was actually paroled and released on the 21st of December 2019. Don't know how I feel about that. I really don't. I mean, maybe 30 years, 28 years. So she'd done the 28. But it was 28 to life. But anyway. Now, that's the last I've heard. So as I've said, Butch is out. Tabitha's now out. I don't believe Michelle will get out again. Now, Michelle herself, if you have watched the film or you want to watch the film is called Rivals, okay? In the American release was called The Stalking of Laurie Shaw, but the non-American release was called Rivals. It was back in 2000 this was released, and it does show that Michelle did have naturally dark hair and dark eyes. And in the film, as I believe she did in real life, she bleaches her hair blonde, puts blue contacts in, and completely loses weight and completely changes her whole look. So I don't know, was she insecure originally? And then she had this boyfriend she couldn't believe she had. I don't know. I mean, if you saw him, I don't know. But when I've seen more up-to-date interviews with Michelle, which she's done many interviews this girl's done, and still shows no remorse whatsoever. Her hair's dark again. Her eyes appear to be dark again, so she's obviously not wearing the contacts anymore. She now has gone by her Christian name again, which is Lisa, as I said at the beginning. She now uses that instead of Michelle, trying to really distance herself from the Laurie Shaw murder. Okay. There was also a book released in 2001 called Overkill, and whereas the film, it was apparently people weren't happy about the film, and as I said, I wouldn't say romanticized, but it was certainly embellished. But a lot of the facts that I've come to you today with are in the film. They are, just a few things have been changed. But for the most part, and of course, the murder itself is kind of shown in the film, whereas we don't actually know. We can only go by Tabitha and Butchie's words over Michelle's, and Michelle just had no credibility. Remember, I says that she reckons she was being framed because of the gang rape she was accusing the police department of. Well, one of the officers she was accusing, or it was another one, because apparently she accused a lot of people of rape. Michelle did over the years, whether it be the police officers there, the prison guards, her own family from years previous, somebody else accusing Butch of being violent and sexually assaulting her. She said this a lot. Apparently there was 11 different accusations out there of her. So her credibility was pretty much zero anyway. And the reason I say that is these were proved to be to not be true. But the one officer that she went after, and I believe he was a guard at the prison, it was proved that when she said he'd done that to her, he was on his honeymoon. So there was just so much that went against this girl's word. So when the film did come out, um, I understand why they showed the murder as they did. Okay, but I don't think people were happy about that. They just weren't happy with the film all in all. I didn't think it was a bad representation of the whole thing as a film goes. It was a Lifetime film, it wasn't an 18 type film or anything. They showed what they could show. So I don't think it was a terrible portrayal of the case at all. But I could be completely wrong. Okay, people will feel differently about it. But yes, that was the brutal stalking of Laurie show. Okay, the brutal stalking of Laurie show story. Oh God, just such a shame, such a real shame. If you haven't seen the film, I think it's on YouTube. I know it used to be on Sky, but I think I saw it on YouTube. I don't know if you have to pay for it or not. But yeah, it'll give you more of an idea of the characters I've been talking about. And like I say, they're not too far removed. I think the reason they said it was romanticized slightly was because although Michelle was shown as completely unhinged in it, there was kind of little bits where you'd be thinking, oh, is that why? There was kind of a kind of excuse put in there, not massively, but it was there. So that could have been why there was a problem with it. But like I say, it's online if you want to see it. The book, I haven't read myself, but I've read the reviews on it. It looks like it's a fantastic book and a more in-depth portrayal of what happened. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me. As I said, I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. It'd be lovely if you could subscribe, but I just want to thank you for watching. Thank you so much. And although I won't be here on this Thursday, this story and I've got another one will be uploaded onto my pre-recorded videos, and I will be back next Tuesday. So thank you so much. Thank you. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.